Well, good evening and welcome to everybody. It's good to see your faces up here tonight. If you're with us live, it's good to see your faces. If it's not, it's all good. You know what I mean? I'm glad you're catching the recording, and we hope you benefit from this. How long have we been thinking about teaching this? Like, it's not a matter of like weeks or months or something like that, like legit. We've been talking
20
about
years.
teaching this series.
About 20 years. Yep. At least 15.
Okay, I'm going to go 15 because
Yeah, but we
have a
just
tendency sometimes kind of
I do
stretch stuff. You ever
exaggerate.
notice that?
Well, but I love you. Is that an exaggeration or is that the truth?
I hope it's the truth.
And the truth is we've been thinking about doing a parenting series. We've been asked to do a parenting series, but we thought maybe we should let our kids grow up and actually
Want to see if it worked or not.
to see if our philosophies would actually work. And the good news is they did.
Yeah, they did. In saying that, in true fashion to the way that we teach, when we bring material, we want to bring you what has worked for our family, and hopefully there'll be some inspiration in there. And as always, we try to bring things from a very fundamental standpoint. And so that's really what inspired tonight's lesson specifically, is kind of starting with, okay, let's start with the 101s, right?
Yep.
And in fact, tonight's lesson,
it can't get more 101 than this.
Well, but I'll tell you what, it is really overlooked when we start talking about parenting and parenting in unity and things of that nature. I would say that of all the things that we're going to teach, as fundamental as this is, as basic as it is, it's probably one of the most overlooked principles when it comes to parenting, based on our experience of working with thousands of couples over the years.
Yep.
And honestly, a lot of opportunities that we overcame as time went on as well. Well, I want to lay out some backdrop here, and I got a couple of notes. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. In fact, I'll put my 40s on here. Here we go.
40s?
They're about 240. Anyway.
40s or 50s.
So, everything that we're going to talk about, the bottom line is that, look, it's not a pill. It's not you take one of these and it's all going to be good. They are principles. They're things, again, that we implemented. But the bottom line is that parenting is difficult. We often say God puts two things in our life to keep us humble. One
another
is marriage, because we get to see each other completely raw, don't we? In our best and in our not so best.
Yep.
And we'll be stretched more by one another. And then the other thing is kids. I think that kids have been, and raising kids have been, one of the most challenging, if not the most, truly the most challenging.
I think parenting adult children, nobody let me know how difficult. Like, they're tough when they're little. I love teenage years. That was easy to me. I don't know. We had great kids that leaned into us, but man, parenting adult kids, and our kids are still great, but wowza.
Yeah. And I wonder too, if maybe that wasn't because nobody did talk to us about how difficult it was.
Right. Yeah.
Or if they did, we weren't paying attention, because adulting kids really has been a very, very challenging season for us. So, look, our family's not perfect. We've still got a lot to learn, but there have been a lot of things that we learned along the way that I believe have made it. We develop principles, rather so much as rules and regulations and things of that nature. It's not that we don't have those, but we really focus more on the principle, which allows us to make decisions very quickly. There have definitely been seasons, in full disclosure, where we felt like we were sinking and we were barely afloat and we struggled. And the bottom line is if you've got kids, you totally understand that, because we all screw it up from time to time, because it's the nature of the beast. There's probably a lot of books out there, but because of the unique dynamic of every single family, that's why in the beginning, we talk about the things that we're going to talk about. We're never going to tell you what you need to do. It's not our style. If this is your first time attending one of these calls, you need to understand that we're going to teach you how to think, not what to think. We're going to share with you specific principles that work for us. Like I said, if I haven't said that enough, but it's meant to kind of get the juices flowing. And maybe you can cherry pick some of those things that you think will work within your family dynamic and adapt those. But I think by and large, what we want to do is we want to inspire you with some thoughts and then also give you some of the hardcore how-tos that we did do, that we did find that have been successful. In full disclosure, all of our kids love the Lord. They really do. All of our kids love us. All of our kids still come to us for advice. How old are our kids now?
22, 24, and 29.
Right. So we still got some navigating to do, but the bottom line is, up until this point, not too shabby.
Yeah.
So we're excited to share with you some of these things. And so again, like I said, tonight's lesson was really inspired by what are some of the fundamentals in a unified parenting relationship that sometimes get overlooked. And in this case, we think this one is one that gets overlooked maybe the most often. So why don't you lead us out with some
Yeah, so
action
just
points?
kind of piggybacking off of what Greg said, no earthly relationship's going to test you quite like your marriage relationship or your parenting relationship. So parenting is not for the faint at heart. We're so glad you're tuned in. The question then is, if we want to parent in unity, how do you actually do that? What are the principles that work? Because in today's world, man, there are so many different dynamics. You got the his, hers, and ours. You've got a lot of times where
meaning blended families, in other
blended
words. It's a
families.
very real dynamic in today's world. It's probably not addressed as much as it should be, although we're starting to see some people come forward and really
Right.
begin to
And
give
so
some
when
good
we
teaching
put the
on this.
lessons in the series together, we were thinking with that dynamic in mind. We were also thinking for people who have small little ones at home and those busy years, the teenage years, where it seems like you're running through, and the middle school years all the way up to the parenting of adult children. And so the principles we were looking for and what we were asking God wisdom for was what's universal. And so the very first thing, the most important thing that you can do, and it's going to
That it may be the most often overlooked, though.
yes, most often looked often, is to prioritize the two of you. So though it may seem kind of counterintuitive, the best thing that you can do for your kids is to let them know that the two of you come number one and that your kids are second in that. So if you're taking notes tonight, the very first thing that we want to have you put your mind around, come back, have a conversation around it, is to create a rhythm to prioritize the two of you so that you can connect, and then also to communicate that hierarchy to your kids. I think what we've witnessed over the years, babe, is that, there's so many times in different seasons, certainly are more demanding than others. But a lot of times what happens is couples get so invested in their kids. They spend all their time is consumed with the children running to and fro, from sport.
Well, a lot of parents kind of live vicariously through their kids too.
Yeah.
And we have a tendency to want to give our kids experiences and such that maybe we were deprived from. And it's definitely not a good parenting motive.
Right.
It's counterintuitive, again, because it almost sounds crazy to say it, but it not only can hurt us and our relationship, but it actually, I think, a lot of times sets our kids up for failure too, and teaches them to live a life that is busy as a maggot in hot water. You know what I'm saying? Just zip, 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 all the time, where they wear themselves out, and it's not a good pattern.
Sometimes the analogies he uses is just a little disgusting.
I'm sorry, they just come out.
No, but they consume all their time, all their energy, and they're focused on the ups and the downs of their kids, and they're running here, they're running there, that they fail to slow down and actually connect together. I'm convinced that's why we see so many divorces after 23, 25 years of marriage. The kids leave home and all of a sudden they look at one another and they don't know one another. And so it's really important. And again, the best thing that you can do is to make sure that your kids know that they come number two. So if you're taking notes, create a rhythm to prioritize your connection and communicate the hierarchy that they actually come number two.
So I'm going to piggy off of what you just said.
Okay.
I remember years ago, I want to add some context to this. And how I learned this, because I didn't enter into our relationship and our marriage with this opinion
Right.
or this belief at all. In fact, it was quite a point of contingency early on in our marriage.
Yes, it was.
I remember, and I can't really remember what it was that we were fussing about, but
Fussing about what time Courtney would go to bed.
okay, well, leave it to you to remember all the specifics. Anyway, we had been into this debate, and it had gotten into a bit of a heated debate. And I remember at one point I looked at you and I told her, I said, Julie, I need you to understand something. My kids will always come first, and you will always come second to my kids.
Yep. And I responded, babe, I'll tell you what, if you can show me that in scripture, I'll submit to it.
She actually said a few more things, just so you know.
That was the good version of it.
But she said, Greg, she said, that's not right.
Right.
She said, that's not right. She said, that is not even biblical. And I said, oh, yes, it is. And she's like, well, if you can show me that in scripture, then I'll submit to that for sure. Well, I was pretty determined that I was going to be able to, but let me tell you where the comment that I made came from. When we do reboots with couples, which if I think everybody here knows what it is, but if you don't know, it's a 2-day deep dive where you just focus on taking your marriage from good to great, or you take it from off the cliff to great. Right. It's a one-on-one private retreat that we and or our coaches do, and we highly encourage you to do that if you've not done it yet. But when we do a reboot, there's a part in the reboot where we talk about how beliefs are formed. I'm going to give you 3 real quick. Okay. One is by life experience. I did this happened. Therefore, when I do this happens. And although that may be true, it's not always true. Right. The second way, not necessarily in this order, but someone that we love or someone that we trust says something, and then we form a belief around that because we believe them, and then we form a belief around that. And again, not necessarily always true, could be or may not be. And then the final way, what's the final way? 3 repetition. Is through repetition. Someone says something over and over again. Back in the day, we called it brainwashing. Today, it's more commonly referred to as our programming. But this is where culture really affects our belief systems and stuff, which is why it's really important that we stay in touch with a biblical worldview in this case, because if not, then what happens is we allow culture to kind of wash away our value systems and such based on what culture says is normal. So in this case, number 2 was the one that bit me. So my grandmother, somebody I loved and respected and trusted tremendously, when I was a child, had said something about someone, and she said, she's chosen that man over those kids. Well, first of all, it was this person's second marriage. Second of all, I completely, my little mind took it out of context. Now, that was all that I heard in the conversation, but I had heard that said by my grandmother on a few different occasions. And so what my little mind at like 8 or 9 years old thought was that the kids should be first, not the spouse.
So when he told me that I would always come second, he was convinced in his mind, because his godly grandmother had said it, that it had to be scriptural. Yes.
And she was probably to date, other than my wife, the best Christian, and an example of living out Christ's life on earth that I know of. My own mom does a pretty good job of it too, actually, come to think of it. Anyhow, so it was mistaken. But what I want you to understand is that I formed a deeply held belief about that, and it was damaging my marriage relationship, because of course, I was determined to find out where it was at in scripture, and I went looking for it and I couldn't find it. And so I thought, well, I'll find some more people that may be able to kind of help support my idea here, because that's what we do. And so I was at work, and this guy that was probably, I don't know, 15 years my senior, maybe a little more than that even, we happened to get in a conversation shortly thereafter, and I was telling him about this conversation with Julie, and he said, well, I think I need to stop you there. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, well, one of these days your kids are going to grow up. And he said, if things go well, they're going to move out and they're going to start their own life and they're going to do their own thing and they're going to be gone and out of your house. And hopefully Julie is still there. So you better play the long game here is basically what he was saying. And he said, you need to make sure that you prioritize your wife and that it is a stated fact within your home, because he said it actually helps give your kids security and teaches them what a marriage should look like, what a healthy marriage should look like. And it kind of rocked me back. I processed it. And then what ended up happening is I came back to Julie and I said, hey, you know what? I'm really sorry. You were right. I was, you know what I'm trying to say. I was not as right. That's exactly right.
Now, but from that day forward, then we really began to communicate an entirely different message, the message that we're encouraging you to actually communicate. And at any point you can do that, again, whether your kids are little, teenagers, or adult.
So I just, again, because I know that sometimes this can sound a little controversial. And so I just want to tell you that our experience in our own family is that we did communicate. Now, this is not a snarky head wagging kind of communication that you're having with your kids. It's not trying to belittle them and make them feel lesser than. It's really more of a rising up and a making sure that they understand that this woman right here, make no mistake, if you try to divide us and or get in between us and or pin us against each other, it is not going to go well for you, because this is number one. This is number one. She is always going to be number one. And she communicated the same thing. And it really kind of set a tone for our kids, which I think added some security to our home so that they knew that they were safe. Go ahead.
Right. So, obviously we're not trying to say to neglect your kids. There's going to come times when they have to take precedence. There are times where it's not like we're just going to go out on a date and not change their diaper or stay up all night with them. You guys get the idea, though. It's this idea of being able to prioritize this connection and establish the hierarchy that we are one and we will not be divided. So there's going to be moments where you have to be able to put them first, of course. But the idea is to communicate. We're one. We're not going to be divided. The two of us are the priority. And by doing that, you actually create a very secure environment for your kids. I can remember, because we had such a united front, if we ever began to get sideways, our kids would be like, you guys need to go out on a date. And this was from little on up. They began to tell us those things. So what does it actually look like? Let me give you some examples of what it looks like to prioritize the two of you. So if you're taking notes, number 2 is establish a time to discover one another. And I think that, some of you out there going, yeah, well, they're little and we don't have babysitters and all that. There's always a way to be able to establish a time for you to connect.
Intentional, yeah.
If you're intentional. I remember when our kids were little, we actually had a lot of other families that were in the same kind of boat as we were, where not a lot of extra cash. And so we would share every other weekend so that the other couple could go out on a date. With that, I want to encourage you, don't do date nights. As you're discovering one another, don't just have another activity that you're checking off the list and say, oh yeah, we went out on a date. The idea is to actually connect when you're going out, to discover one another.
Yeah, and that might make a difference on what you choose to do.
Right.
We've had, and we've talked about this on other calls, but when we do, so a best practice, one of the things is we used to kind of let date night be a floating day or a floating night, meaning whenever it was convenient for us to do it, then that's when we would do it, right? And then sometimes we would end up doing it or not doing it. And so anyway, but what we learned is that if we established what day of the week, what night of the week that it was actually going to be, then there was some anticipation. And I can remember And even still, I think, gosh, today's Wednesday, it's date night. All right. Like literally first thing in the morning, I'm like, okay, so that's cool. Plus it allows you to kind of plan for things and plan for connection.
Yeah. So the idea is, how can you intentionally honor one another?
Yep. Absolutely. And connect,
And
actually connect
Yeah.
intentionally. Don't go to sports bars. I mean, unless y'all like watching games together. I'm actually serious when I say that, because some people do like that.
Yeah.
And if you do, then that's great. But what happens to me if I go to a restaurant and it's a
Oh,
date
it
night?
drives me nuts. We're like I'm trying to talk to him and he can't help it. His eyes automatically shift
Well,
up.
there's just like all this activity over here, and I'm
Squirrel.
like, yeah, exactly. So maybe that's just me, but I think it's a poor practice generally, unless again that is part of your date night, and part of how you're connecting is maybe watching a game. So
So why don't you share
prioritize. Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah. Share number 3.
Prioritize intentional conversation. So one of our clients, which happened to be on this call, Chris and Tina, y'all wave real quick.
Well, no, they can't see him because we pinned
Oh,
us.
well, that's okay. They
That's
still
all right.
wave. I can see them. They started doing what they call a Sunday night locker room, and we opened this up for Q&A. Maybe they want to speak about that and talk about the format of their Sunday evening
Yeah.
locker room, and just kind of how they set aside that time very intentionally each week to have a debrief
Meaningful.
and then a brief kind of, if you will, for the upcoming week, to set expectations and just connect and discover one another. And so for us, we hold daily conversations
Yeah.
personally, and what we do is we have learned that it's really healthy for us in our daily rhythm to make sure that we prioritize Bible reading and prayer together. You've probably heard the stat, but give it to them.
1 in 1,153 people. So they did this huge study, and what they found is that in 1,153 people, only one of those, if they were praying together daily, would ever get a divorce. So it's more than 99% percentile.
It's almost like 99
It's divorce proofing your marriage by praying together daily.
So look, that stat's enough to motivate me. It really is, right? And so it's not that we're just trying to prevent divorce. We're trying to make sure that we're connected, right? And we're connected intimately, not just in the bedroom, but in our daily communication. So we spend a significant amount of time. I'm not going to say every day. It is every day, but there's days when it doesn't happen. You know what I'm saying? Because circumstances prevail, like when we're on the road or something like that. But we spend time in scripture and we spend time in prayer together. So that helps us to become unified and to set our unification for the day. Yeah. You look like you had a thought.
No, well, just if you can think about it, I want to slow way down. And the idea is, if you want to intentionally connect and have conversation, you got to plan it. And so when can you have a meaningful conversation? For us, it works best for us because we work together 24/7 to do that first thing in the morning. For many couples, it's before they go to bed at night. So the idea is, and for some people, it's like, man, we can't do it daily, but we could do it twice a week. And so, but if the intent is there and the planning is there, then you begin to have the conversations. Another practical way. Did you have something else?
No. I was just going to affirm what you said.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, is to prioritize the two of you is by not allowing your kids to cause a wedge between the two of you. So if you're taking notes, make decisions together. Just write that down. Make decisions together and don't undermine your spouse. So I'm going to tell on me. I remember there was a time where there's this thing between daddies and their sons. And I think that daddies are meant to protect their daughters. And for their sons, there's like this innate posture that they want to prepare their sons for manhood. And so a lot of times I took on the role of being a mediator between Greg and Joshua. Now, nobody asked me to do that. That's just my personality. It was like,
I definitely didn't ask her to do that.
No, you didn't. And so a lot of times Greg goes, you're undermining me. And I'm like, God, how could I possibly undermine you? I'm holding my tongue, even though I think you're doing everything wrong. And
thanks for your honesty.
Yeah. No, it's so there was this time when what I realized was happening, Joshua was coming to you. He's like, what's the matter with dad? And I'd be like, oh, son, he's just having a hard time. He's going through, there's a lot of pressure at work. And I started making these, what I thought were buffering for
I
Greg.
thought you
And
were defending
I
me,
thought I was
actually.
defending him, but in actuality, I was completely undermining him. And what I learned, because Greg said, "You're undermining me." And I'm like, "How am I undermining you?" Because you and Joshua go have these private conversations. And I'm like, "It's because I'm trying to get him to like you again because you're so mean." And anyway, I'm making a little bit of fun by the exaggeration, but it wasn't that far off from that.
No, it wasn't,
And so
actually.
I paused and I was like, "How am I undermining him?" So I had this private conversation with God. And I realized that when I was doing that, it was completely throwing Greg under the bus by saying, "Yeah, Josh, I'm sorry he is so mean," right? Not my heart necessarily. I was trying
Give him a break.
to
He's
give
had
him
a
a
hard
break. He's
day,
had
right?
a hard day. What I learned to do instead was change the languaging to when Joshua would come to me, I would say, "I have no idea. Have you talked to him about that?" And by doing that, what I did is I removed myself from the equation, caused the two of them to have the hard conversation so that they could learn to communicate together. And it took me out of the role. And the other part of that is, instead of like maybe feeling in oppositions, convey that oneness in your parenting decisions.
Can I just
Sure.
quickly speak to what you just
Yeah.
said? It was really brilliant on your part to land on that, and I appreciated it so much because what do you think happened when my son, now she would prepare him a little bit and she might coach him on how to approach me,
Mhm.
so as to
And
get a good
likewise you to
result.
him. Yeah. Mhm.
Absolutely. There was a lot of backroom kind of coaching, but careful not to undermine one another. And so when Joshua would, as an example, would come to me and say, "Hey, Dad, are you okay?" And I might be like, I think so. Why?" And he's like, "Well, just seem a little snarky and a little frustrated or something. Am I doing something wrong?" Of course, immediately I'm
Mhm.
like, "Dude, you're right. I probably have been." It just put my heart in check. So what it did, rather than feeling undermined, is it actually forced Joshua and I to learn how to
Right.
communicate with one another. And yeah, I'm going to tell you straight up, it's been a bumpy ride.
Mhm.
Historically, it really has. But Joshua and I have also developed a very, very tight relationship where we can communicate about things that and understand each other in a way that probably he can't
And I
communicate
think
with
that they
you.
are actually breaking all the generational curses from, that
Yeah.
you were raised with.
Yeah.
I want to come back to, one of the other things that I can think about is there were times where the kids would come to me and ask me for permission, or vice versa. They would go to Greg and ask for permission. And so that united front of saying we are one, we make decisions together. How it played out for us is they might come and say, "Hey, can I do this?" And my response might be, "Wow, I don't know how your dad's going to feel about that. Let me go talk to him." Well, if the answer came back no, then it showed a
Who's
good,
the bad guy?
and I was the good guy,
Right.
or vice versa. And so it's now what we learn to do is, you know what? I'm not sure how we need to do. We're going to have to talk about that
Need to
together.
process it a little bit.
So that inclusive language, and we often share this when we're coaching couples, is like, be inclusive. Don't use, "Well, I have to check with your mom," or "I'm going to have to check with your dad," or, "You know what, your mom's kind of this, so maybe you better not," or "Your father's this and maybe you shouldn't." It's, "Hey, we need this time," or "We need to focus and make a decision about that. Let me get back to you." And for me, a lot of times Joshua was the one who would press, and he's like, "Can I please, please, please just say yes?" And I'm like, "If you continue to press me, the answer is no. I need to process it and I need to talk with your dad about it because I'm not sure how that's going to fit with our schedule."
Yeah, there again, I think a simple statement that we both learned is, you know what? Thank you for asking. Uh, I need to process that a little bit, and I'll probably process it with your mom as well, you know.
Yeah.
But the point is that we're very guarded and careful not to put it off on the other person, or not to be in a united front as it applies to our kids. Now, listen to me, there have been some robust behind the door conversations between Julie and I about our differences in approach to parenting one or the other of the kids,
Yeah. Yeah.
but we did have those parenting conversations in particular. I'm not telling you that kids don't ever need to see conflict, because I think it's healthy for them to see you in conflict, not in all out brawls or anything like that, but they need to learn how to communicate. Conflict is healthy. Conflict is good. It's a sign of a healthy relationship. If there is no conflict, somebody is stuffing something and it's unhealthy. Okay.
Yep.
And so we did have conflict in front of our kids, but as it applied to parenting, we really focused on, especially once we learned how important it was, to make sure that we had those conversations, came in unity together, and then we presented a united front. And we were very careful. And these are just, again, these are some fundamentals about how you can present in unification, also prioritize your relationship, which adds some safety and stability to the home.
Yep. So I guess the next part would be to establish the rules for the road. Why don't you unpack that?
Yeah. So
number 5, if you're taking notes, establish your rules for the road.
Yeah. So I really like to think in terms of principles, and again, it's not that we don't have rules and that we don't have policies, so to
Principles
speak,
for you. Okay.
Yeah, but I think set clear rules for you as a couple, because again, tonight is really about prioritizing the two of you, because you can't give what you don't have. And it's hard to be unified if you never commune together intimately, again, both in the bedroom and hopefully a lot outside of the bedroom as well. Okay. And so setting some rules around that, having some private space and some boundaries that you communicate outward to the kids. I think the first one that comes to mind is, when our kids were really little,
we didn't allow them to sleep in our room. That was one rule. That was just our rule. We're not putting that on
listen,
you.
again, we're not trying to program you. We're just telling you, and I always like to tell you why. But to me, I really wanted our bedroom. We agreed that we wanted our bedroom to be our private area, and it wasn't an area for the whole family to come hang out and everything. Now, there's been times where we've bent that rule or completely broken it, invited them in to do that. But if we go in the room and we close the door, it means it's alone time for me and Julie. It means that we're, decompressing for the day or whatever. And so we told them early on, they're like little bitty dudes and dudettes, right? Like knee high. And we're like, don't knock on the door when we go back there unless you're on fire. If you're on fire, you can knock on the door. But if you're not on fire, don't you dare knock on this door. What I'm trying to convey to them is like, look, this is a priority, and you need to understand that this is a boundary, and you need to understand that you need to respect it. All right. So it better be an emergency if you're coming in to do it. So
they would do a rat-a-tat-tat on the other side of the door, and it's like Greg would say, "Are you on fire?"
I would literally ask them, "Are you on fire?"
And they would say, "No."
But it's kind of important, and then of course we would debate through the door a little bit and gather a little bit more facts. And there were times, obviously, that it was a legitimate reason, to be interrupted or whatever.
Yes.
But what we were just trying to do is just establish some protected time where the kids knew you need to respect this, and your butt needs to be in bed anyhow, so don't come in here and bother us. And again, we're not saying that you shouldn't have your kids sleep with you and things of that nature, but for us, we really protected that bedroom atmosphere.
And I would say this is like, I think for us, the challenging years were probably when they were really little, and then as they've gotten a lot older. And so as adults, we have rules for the road as well. Like, we don't have drama, we have conversations. That's a rule in our household. We have the rule that family is forever. So we used to do this thing, other friends will come and go, but family is forever. So the rules for the road now are, we're going to honor one another. We're going to see the best, believe the best, and speak the best about one another. So when the siblings get in a little bit of rivalry,
and that happens,
jealousy, or they're combating, or they're nitpicking one another, we're like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not seeing the best, believing the best, and speaking the best. And so we establish the rules, we establish our rules, and then we establish rules for the family.
So on that one,
or Greg would like to say principles, and I like that too.
I think that on that one, even recently, especially with those of you who have adult kids, ours are still, one is gone, two are still living here at this point. And there began to be a little bit of a drama between the two that are here. And so because they still live here, we just called a family meeting, and we'd address the elephants in the room. And what we've done historically with this is that if there is some family drama going on, or if there's something that applies to the group as a whole, the Gorman Corporation, you know, we just pull everybody together and we address the elephants that are in the room. And what we've learned is it's helped teach our kids how to deal with conflict, how to squelch drama, and how to begin to talk about in a respectful, adult way in dealing with conflict, so that it doesn't become drama and it doesn't drag on and end up, planting seeds in their relationships
Mhm.
that ends up bearing fruit that we don't want
Yeah.
to
So
produce or
I want to give
reproduce.
one other example, because there was
And
also,
we're about to wrap up, just
yeah,
for those
there
people.
was another time where it seemed like my kids were asking me for advice. So again, talking to the adult parenting, uh, they kept asking me for advice, but when I gave it, they then used it against me, trying to say I was manipulating them. And so I learned, a great rule was just to say, set me up here. Do you want coach, friend, or mom? I had to learn that languaging again to protect the relationship and let me know how to respond to them, because they were learning how to interact with me as a kid to a parent. And so what I love though is that because we had established that we are one, when they began to come against me, and my kids love me, so it's I understand that it was just a bubble, a bump in the road. uh Greg was really great about defending me. It's like, whoa, 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 this is your mom. You asked her for advice, and now you're turning it against her, and you're not going to do that. And he was able to call the reality of it, not in a mean way, not in a harsh way, but just a truth kind of set the tone way. And because we were one, we were able to again establish the hierarchy of the home, and it worked out great.
Yeah. Yeah. So, at the end of the day, take some time and think about what you can do to make sure that you're prioritizing yourselves. And again, and prioritizing your relationship. Some of y'all, your kids are not in the house anymore, and you still need to work on this. So
Right.
you're not off the hook. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, take some time and think about, are you in a rut, in a routine of mundane, same all the time, even same restaurant, same, date night, things of that nature. Again, we mentioned earlier on our date night, instead of checking it off the list, we always ask ourselves, what's the point of a date night? What's the priority of a date night? The reason that we have a date night is not so we can check it off the list. It's so that we can connect. It's so that we can connect. So what do we need to plan for, and what do we need to do in order to facilitate that kind of an environment and that atmosphere where we can actually, connect? We've talked about this story on other calls, but during one season, not too long ago, we were broke as a joke. And we went to literally a new Family Dollar store, Dollar General
Oh,
had opened just down the road, and we're like, let's go check out that new Dollar General, And we went in and we gave ourselves a $5 budget, and we are going to find just the neatest things we could find for $5. And we goofed around, we danced to the silly music they
I
had
really still
playing
have
in
great
there.
pictures of me with like a Santa beard and mustache. That was fun.
We should post it on the thread.
We'll have to try to find
I'm
it.
just saying.
Yeah.
But anyway, and so I think that, one of the other principles that we teach in wrapping up here is we teach that fun is not an activity, it's an attitude.
Right.
So you could probably sift through some of the lessons. I might take the time this evening, because I want to get to Q&A, and I definitely want to get some best practices from you, and I'll let you wrap everything
Yeah.
up.
So let me just end with this.
Wait, I want to make sure that they got that.
Okay.
Fun is not an activity, it is an attitude. You can have fun shoveling horse crap if you've got the right attitude about it. You really can. I've done it. I speak from personal experience, okay? But the point is that I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in the activity that we forget the attitude that we need to carry it.
Right.
And for
Right.
years, one of the things that I did to demonstrate that you were a priority is I actually scheduled time in my calendar, made an appointment with myself to think about how I could express love to you in a way that you could receive it, or what I could do to make sure that we were connecting.
Right.
And so again, I don't think it has to be rocket science, but it does take a little bit of intentionality. Wrap us up there, Maestro.
So get ready. If you have a question, do your raise hand and we'll call on you here in just a
Or
second.
best practice.
Or best practice. Would love to hear that. The group is always so much better when we all share our best practices. But here's the end notes. If you're taking notes, spend some time privately talking about what's important. So define what's important. For us, it was important for our kids that their faith was their own. For us, it was important that they knew that they were loved unconditionally. For us, it was important that they were prepared for success and that they were ready for the world. And then the second part of that is not just what's important. It was also important to us that we always stayed unified and stayed connected. It was important to us that we stayed connected with our kids. So we put some rules around where we literally had 3 nights minimum. We had dinner around the kitchen table. And that rule or that principle allowed us to know what we were going to say yes to or no to. They weren't involved with all the extra activities and they survived. So
Well, and the kids
what's
learn.
important and
Sorry.
why, secondly, why it's important.
Yeah.
Why did we have those things? We didn't just have rules for the sake of having rules. Our kids didn't get to spend the night over at other people's houses. They came home around 11 o'clock because nothing good happens after.
Or we had
11
kids,
o'clock.
over to our house, but
Right,
we
but-
didn't let them spend the night.
And so we were able to, because it was principle driven and because we knew why we had those rules, we didn't just have a bunch of things and throw it at them. We had reasons behind it. And so have a conversation of what's important in this season, whether your kids are little, in the middle school years, maybe they're approaching adulthood or they're getting married and having kids of their own. What's important and why is it important? It's never too late to establish that hierarchy. It's never too late to have that intentional connection and communication. And it's never too late to convey that to the kids of why you have those rules and why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. At the end of the day, your kids are going to learn how to do family, not by what it is that you train them with your words, but what it is that you do to train them by your actions. And when you prioritize one another, they learn what it looks like to have a healthy relationship.
Amen. Amen.
They learn what it looks like to have the stability and the security of knowing that mom and dad's got mom and dad's back.
Right.
And that as long as mom and dad are intact and doing well, everything else will fall into place, because 2 are better than 1, right? And 1 puts 1,000 to flight, 2 puts 10,000 to flight. And so I think that these things are things that, again, they're things that unfortunately I think get lost and we forget because society would tell us that our kids do need to be the priority and that we should make our whole life, even after they're adults, about fixing all their issues and bailing them out and all that stuff. And I just don't think that it's healthy. And I think that we're seeing some of the results of that in our culture today because it's not generally working out and raising good, responsible, secure, and self-secure kids that have their identity where it should be rather than a bunch of things that it shouldn't be, if that makes sense. So prioritize you. There'll be much more in the upcoming weeks where we will get down into really some more of the nitty-gritty of the actual parenting practices.
Some of the philosophies that we have, like you can do whatever you want. Is it that?
We actually told our kids frequently, you can do whatever you want.
We'll tell you the rest of that in a couple weeks.
That's right.
For now, we're going to remove the pin. And if you have a question, comment, or best practice, raise your hand.